Close your eyes. Imagine everything disappears. No stars, no planets, no light, no sound, just you. Now remove space. There is no distance between things because there are no things. There is no direction, no up, no down, no left. Now remove time. No before, no after, no change. What remains? You probably think space and time are separate ingredients of reality, two different dimensions, two different ideas. But here's the problem. You have never experienced one without the other, not once. Every memory you have is a memory of change in space. Every movement you make requires duration. Every second that passes requires something to move, vibrate, decay, or shift. What if space and time aren't partners? What if they are the same thing viewed from different angles? And what if the universe doesn't exist in time at all, but time emerges from how space behaves? Tonight, we're not just talking physics. We're dismantling the stage on which reality performs. And by the end, you may never think of now the same way again. Let's begin where space and time first betrayed us. At first, the universe seemed simple. Ancient thinkers imagined space as a silent container, an empty box, a stage where events unfolded. Time was different. Time flowed, like a river, invisible, steady, unstoppable. Even Isaac Newton believed this. He described space as absolute, fixed, unmoving, an eternal grid stretching infinitely in all directions. And time ticked forward independently of everything else, a universal metronome beating the same for everyone. Under that view, space could exist even if nothing happened inside it, and time would still pass even if nothing moved. But that idea hides a subtle contradiction. If nothing changes, what does it mean for time to pass? Imagine a universe frozen, every atom motionless, no decay, no vibration, no light traveling, no thought forming. Would 1 second feel different from 1 million years? Without change, time becomes indistinguishable from nothing. Time needs motion. Now consider space. Imagine a universe with no distances, no separation, no geometry, everything compressed into a single dimensionless point. In such a universe, what does movement mean? Movement requires distance. Distance requires space. Without it, motion becomes meaningless. And without motion, time collapses again. Already, something is unraveling. Space enables motion. Motion defines time. Time measures change in space. They are feeding each other. But it took centuries for physics to admit this. Then came a patent clerk in Switzerland who asked an uncomfortable question. What if time isn't universal? What if it depends on motion? When Albert Einstein published his theory of relativity in 1905, he didn't just modify Newton's equations. He shattered the independence of space and time. He proposed something radical. Time moves differently depending on how fast you travel through space. The faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. This isn't philosophy, it's measurable. Astronauts age slightly slower than people on Earth. Satellites must correct for time dilation or GPS systems would fail within hours. But here's the deeper shock. If two observers disagree about how much time has passed, and they disagree about distances, then neither space nor time can be absolute. Instead, they fuse into something else, a four-dimensional fabric, space-time. You don't move through space over time. You move through space-time, like a needle threading through fabric. And gravity? Gravity isn't a force pulling objects. It's the curvature of space-time itself. Mass bends space. And because space and time are intertwined, it bends time too. Near a black hole, time slows dramatically, not metaphorically, literally. Stand close enough to a massive object, and your clock ticks slower than someone far away. That means time is not independent. It is shaped by space. But here's where it becomes even stranger. You are always moving at the same total speed through space-time. Always. Even when you're sitting still, you are traveling through time at full speed. But when you accelerate through space, you trade speed in time, like shifting currency. There's a fixed limit, the speed of light. Nothing with mass can exceed it. Why? Because to reach light speed in space, you would have to stop moving through time entirely. Light doesn't experience time. From a photon's perspective, emission and absorption are the same. Instant. This is not poetic language. It's what the math implies. So ask yourself, if light experiences no time, and light defines the structure of space-time, then is time fundamental? Or is it a consequence of geometry? We're beginning to see the first crack. Space and time cannot be separated because they are not independent dimensions. They are different aspects of one geometric structure, but that structure hides a deeper mystery. Because relativity merges space and time, quantum mechanics tears them apart, and that tension changes everything. In the world of the very small, something unsettling happens. Quantum mechanics describes particles not as solid objects, but as probability waves, blurred, indefinite, existing in multiple states until measured. But here's the catch. Quantum theory treats time differently from space. In relativity, space and time are unified. In quantum mechanics, time sits in the equations like an external parameter, a background clock, untouched, absolute. The two greatest theories in physics disagree. Relativity says space-time is dynamic and flexible. Quantum mechanics assumes time is fixed and universal. They cannot both be fully correct. And nowhere does this conflict become sharper than inside a black hole. Imagine falling toward one. From your perspective, time flows normally. From an outside observer's perspective, you slow down as you approach the event horizon. You appear frozen, never quite crossing. Two different descriptions of reality, both valid. But which one is real? Now push further. Inside a black hole, space-time curves so intensely that the roles of space and time begin to swap. The direction toward the singularity becomes as inevitable as the future. You cannot avoid it, just as you cannot avoid tomorrow. Inside, space behaves like time, and time behaves like space. The distinction dissolves, which suggests something extraordinary. Perhaps space and time are not fundamental ingredients. Perhaps they are emergent, like temperature emerging from molecular motion. There are modern theories loop quantum gravity, holographic principles, emergent space-time proposals that suggest space-time itself arises from deeper quantum information, tiny bits, quantum entanglement patterns, networks of relationships. In this view, space is not a container. It is a result of connections, and time may emerge from the growth of those connections, from increasing entanglement, from rising complexity. Imagine reality not as a flowing river but as a static tapestry, every moment past, present, future woven together. This is called the block universe. In this model, time does not flow. You move through it, but it does not move. The future already exists, just as the past still exists. We simply experience one slice at a time. But if all moments coexist, what does now mean? It becomes subjective, relative to the observer. There is no universal present. Two observers moving differently will slice space-time differently. Your now is not someone else's now. That means the present is not absolute. And if the present is not absolute, then time as we feel it is not fundamental. It is experiential, emergent from consciousness navigating geometry. But here's the quiet shock. If space-time is a unified structure, and you are embedded within it, then your entire life, every breath, every choice, every thought exists as a four-dimensional shape. You are not just who you are now, you are your entire timeline, from birth to death, a continuous world line stretching through space-time, not moving inside it, but part of it, like a thread sewn into fabric. And that changes something profound, because if space and time cannot exist separately, then neither can you in the universe. You are not in space-time. You are space-time locally organized. Your atoms curve it. Your presence defines geometry, and your perception of time arises from the structure of your brain processing change. The ticking you feel is not the universe flowing. It is your internal complexity increasing, entropy rising, memories forming. The arrow of time may not be a cosmic feature. It may be statistical, a direction emerging because disorder increases. In a perfectly reversible universe, there would be no arrow, no past, no future, just geometry. And here, everything converges. Space defines relationships between events. Time defines ordering of those relationships. Remove space, and there are no relationships. Remove. Time and relationships cannot evolve. They are inseparable not because physics says so, but because existence itself demands it. To exist is to occupy space-time. To change is to move within it. To remember is to compare different slices of it. Space and time are two languages describing one reality, one fabric, one structure. And you have never stepped outside it. Not in dreams, not in thought, not in imagination. Even imagination rearranges spatial memory over temporal processing. You cannot conceive of time without space. Try. Picture a second without distance. It dissolves. Picture distance without duration. It freezes into meaninglessness. They collapse into each other, which brings us back to where we started. Close your eyes again. Imagine everything gone. No space, no time, no separation, no sequence. What remains? Not even darkness, because darkness requires space to be dark and time to be experienced. Space and time cannot exist separately because existence itself is their union. And you, right now, are the evidence. The universe is not unfolding. It is structured. You are not drifting through time. You are tracing a path already embedded in space-time's geometry. And perhaps the most unsettling thought of all, if space-time is one unified whole, then every moment you call future is not approaching you. It is already there, waiting, not in front of you, but alongside you, in the same eternal fabric that has never once been divided good, because now we leave comfort behind. Up to this point, space and time have been woven together, stitched by relativity into a four-dimensional fabric, elegant, smooth, predictable. But that fabric tears, not metaphorically, mathematically, and the tear begins at the smallest possible scale. Shrink yourself down, past cities, past cells, past atoms, past the trembling cloud of electrons and the nucleus packed with protons and neutrons. Go deeper, into quarks, into quantum fields. Now go smaller than anything you can visualize, smaller than size itself. You arrive at something called the Planck scale, where distances are about 1035 meters and time ticks in intervals of 1044 seconds. Below this scale, our equations collapse, relativity breaks, quantum mechanics misfires, and space-time, the smooth fabric we trusted, stops behaving like fabric at all. It begins to flicker. Imagine the surface of a calm ocean. From far above, it looks flat, continuous, serene. But dive deep enough, and that surface becomes violent foam, turbulence, bubbles forming and collapsing faster than you can track. At the Planck scale, space-time is not smooth. It may be granular, foamy, discrete. This possibility was hinted at by physicists like John Wheeler, who described a restless quantum foam where space-time itself fluctuates wildly, not particles inside space, space itself fluctuating, time itself jittering. If that's true, then space and time are not fundamental ingredients. They are emergent patterns, like temperature, emerging from molecular motion. No single molecule contains heat. Heat arises collectively. So what if space-time arises collectively, from something deeper, something pre-geometric? This is where theories like loop quantum gravity step in. They suggest space is woven from tiny loops, quantized chunks of area and volume, not continuous, discrete, like pixels on a screen. Except these pixels are not in space. They create space. And time may not tick universally. Instead, it may emerge from how these loops evolve relative to each other. In some formulations, time disappears entirely from the fundamental equations. No variable labeled t, no flowing parameter, just relationships, correlations, changes defined only relative to other changes. In this view, asking what time is it becomes meaningless at the deepest level. Only asking, how does this configuration relate to that one, makes sense. Time becomes bookkeeping, a measure of relational change. Now pause, because this destabilizes something essential. If time is not fundamental, then what is the present? You feel it. You live inside it. But physics increasingly suggests that the present moment is not universal. It is local, subjective, dependent on motion and gravity. Two observers moving differently slice space-time differently. One's present overlaps with another's future. This is not speculation. It's built into relativity. And if space-time itself emerges from deeper quantum relationships, then perhaps the entire block universe, past, present, future, is also emergent. A large-scale illusion arising from microscopic entanglement. Yes, entanglement. That strange quantum connection where two particles share a state across distance. Measure one here, and the other responds instantly there. No signal traveling through space, because at the fundamental level, distance may not exist the way we think. Some physicists propose that space-time geometry itself arises from entanglement patterns. The more entangled two regions are, the closer they appear in space. Reduce entanglement, and space stretches. If that's true, then space is not primary. Connection is. And time may emerge from how entanglement changes. From increasing complexity. From growing correlations. There is a bold proposal called the holographic principle, It suggests that the information describing a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary like a hologram, meaning the three-dimensional world you perceive may arise from two-dimensional information at its edge. In this picture, space-time is not a stage. It's a projection, a decoding, a consequence of information relationships. And that reframes everything. Because if space emerges from entanglement, and time emerges from change and entanglement, then neither can exist alone. They are twin shadows cast by deeper informational structure. Remove relational change, no time. Remove relational structure, no space. They collapse together. But here's where it becomes even more unsettling. If time is emergent, it may not be continuous. It may not flow. The sense of flow could arise from entropy. Entropy, the measure of disorder, tends to increase. Ice melts. Stars burn fuel. Memories accumulate. This directionality gives us an arrow of time. But the underlying laws of physics are mostly time-symmetric. Run the equations forward or backward, they work. So why does time feel one way? Because low entropy in the past created a gradient, like a slope we slide down. But at the deepest level, the equations don't prefer forward. They allow both, which suggests something radical. The flow of time may not be fundamental. It may be perspectival, emergent from our position within a low-entropy region of space-time. You do not experience time flowing. You experience increasing entropy. Your brain forms memories. Your cells age. Your universe expands. But if you could step outside space-time, if such a thing were possible, there might be no flow at all, just structure, all at once. This perspective was explored by physicists like Carlo Rovelli, who argues that time may not exist at the fundamental level. Instead, there are only events and their relations. No universal ticking, no cosmic clock, only change relative to change. In this relational view, asking what time is it in the universe is like asking where is north in the universe. North is a local concept, defined relative to Earth's rotation. Time, too, may be local, defined, relative to processes. This shifts something inside you, because it means the solid present you trust is not a universal feature of reality. It is a slice carved by your motion and gravitational environment. And that slice is not shared by all observers. Your now is tilted compared to someone moving at near light speed, which means your future might already be someone else's past, all coexisting in the same space-time manifold. If space-time is emergent from entanglement, and entanglement is about correlation without distance, then at the deepest level, separation itself may be secondary. Distance may be a large-scale effect. Time may be a bookkeeping tool. What's fundamental might be information, relationships, network structure. Imagine the universe as an immense graph nodes connected by links. Geometry emerges from connectivity. Temporal ordering emerges from causal structure within that graph. Space and time are not separate axes. They are properties of how nodes relate. And you are a localized, self-referential cluster of these relations. Your brain is an entangled network interpreting other entangled networks. You call this interpretation reality, but underneath it, space and time are inseparable because they are not independently real. They are jointly emergent, two aspects of a single relational architecture. And here's the quiet implication. If space-time is emergent, then it can break down. In extreme conditions like the Big Bang, the distinction between space and time may dissolve completely. At t=0, our equations imply infinite density and curvature. But that infinity likely signals not a real physical state, but the breakdown of space-time description. Before the Planck time, asking what happened before may be meaningless, because before presupposes time, and if time itself emerges from quantum geometry, there may have been no before, not because nothing existed, but because before is not a valid concept at that scale. The same may apply to black hole singularities. Space-time may not continue smoothly inward. Instead, the description may transition to a different regime where space and time lose distinct meaning. In some speculative models, the interior of a black hole could connect to another region, perhaps even another universe. But these ideas depend on space-time being flexible, emergent, dynamic, not fundamental. And if it's emergent, then asking whether space can exist without time becomes like asking whether waves can exist without water. Waves are patterns in water. Remove water, no waves. Remove relational structure, no space-time. Space and time cannot exist separately because they are co-generated by deeper dynamics. You cannot peel one away. You cannot isolate time in a box. You cannot hold space still while time runs. Every attempt collapses into contradiction. The deeper physics digs, the more unity it reveals. From Newton's absolutes to Einstein's fusion, from smooth manifolds to quantum foam, from geometry to entanglement, every layer erodes separation, and we are left with a profound suspicion. The division between space and time was never real. It was a convenient approximation, useful at human scales, but false at cosmic depth. And we are not finished, because if space and time are emergent from information, then the final question is unavoidable. What is information made of? And why does its structure give rise to a universe that feels like something rather than nothing? That is where we go next, and there the boundary between physics and philosophy disappears completely. Now we reach the edge, not the edge of space, not the edge of time, the edge of explanation. Because once space and time dissolve into something deeper, into information, relations, entanglement, a more unsettling question emerges. Why does any of it exist at all? If space-time is emergent, then it is not the foundation. If it is not the foundation, then reality rests on something more primitive than distance and duration. Something that does not live in space, something that does not unfold in time, and that forces us into unfamiliar territory. Imagine stripping the universe down even further. Remove stars, remove particles, remove fields, remove geometry itself. What remains? Not emptiness, because emptiness is spatial, not silence, because silence unfolds in time. What remains is structure without extension, relation without distance, difference without duration, pure informational distinction, a binary contrast, this versus that. Physicists like John Archibald Wheeler proposed a radical phrase, it from bit. Physical reality, it arises from informational yes or no distinctions, bits, not matter first, not space-time first, information first. But information about what? Here is where intuition breaks. Information does not require space. It requires distinction, a difference, a state that could be one way or another. In quantum theory, the most fundamental object is not a particle, it is a quantum state, a vector in abstract mathematical space, not physical space. And this state encodes probabilities, potentialities, possibilities. Space and time emerge when these possibilities organize into stable patterns. Think of a symphony. The music you hear is not contained inside the air molecules individually. It emerges from structured vibration. Now imagine space-time itself as music emerging from a deeper score written not in notes, but in quantum correlations. Entanglement becomes harmony. Causal structure becomes rhythm. Geometry becomes resonance, but the score itself, it does not occupy space. It does not unfold in time. It simply is. This is the quiet intellectual shock. The universe may not be happening. It may be structured, all at once, in a timeless informational totality. You experience sequence because your consciousness traces a path through that structure, like a needle following a groove in a record. The groove exists fully, but the music plays only as the needle moves. Your awareness is that needle. Your brain, a biological system increasing entropy, constructs narrative from change, but the deeper structure might not change at all. The block universe returns here not as a philosophical curiosity, but as a geometric consequence. In space-time, every event is a point, your birth, this moment, your final breath. All are coordinates in a four-dimensional manifold, none more real than the others. The present is not a cosmic spotlight. It is a local cross-section. And if space-time itself emerges from deeper information, then the entire manifold is encoded in that informational substrate, not growing, not updating, not flowing, complete. You feel time because you are embedded inside thermodynamic asymmetry. Entropy increases. Memories accumulate in one direction, causes precede effects from your perspective. But from outside the structure, if such a viewpoint were meaningful, there may be no direction at all. Only relation. This reframes mortality. If all events exist within space-time equally, then the past is not destroyed. It is located. Your childhood is not gone. It is a region. Your future is not unreal. It is another region. You simply occupy different coordinates sequentially. Like walking along a mountain path, the path does not vanish behind you. It remains part of the terrain. Space and time cannot exist separately because they are coordinates of one structure. And that structure may itself be the shadow of deeper logic, But here the ground becomes philosophical. If reality is informational at its root, we must ask, why does this information have the particular structure that gives rise to geometry? Why do certain relational patterns generate dimensions? Why does entanglement geometry resemble curved spacetime? Some theorists suggest spacetime geometry arises from quantum error-correcting codes, abstract mathematical protections that preserve information. In this view, the stability of space is not physical at base. It is computational. Reality resembles a self-consistent encoding, not a simulation in a computer, but a structure that behaves mathematically like one. Geometry as redundancy, distance as decoding difficulty, time as computational depth, the universe not as a container of objects but as a process of relational consistency. And if that is true, separation is derivative, space is relational difference, time is relational update. Remove relation, both vanish. The inseparability of space and time is not an accident. It is a clue, a hint that both arise from the same underlying constraints, but something else emerges here. Consciousness. You. Because the experience of time, the felt passage, does not appear in the equations. Physics describes structure. It does not describe experience. The flow of time may not exist in the equations, but it exists in you, or at least it feels that way. Some argue consciousness itself arises from complex informational integration from systems that model their own internal states. Your brain builds a timeline because it encodes memory and prediction. It compresses the block structure into a moving present, but the movement is internal, not external. This means the arrow of time may not be woven into space-time itself. It may be woven into cognition. You remember the past because entropy gradients allow memory storage. You anticipate the future because your nervous system evolved to model upcoming states. The universe does not push you forward. Your biological architecture does. Space and time are unified physically. Flow emerges psychologically. And here, the paradox completes its arc. You cannot separate space from time because motion defines duration. You cannot separate duration from space because change requires geometry. And you cannot separate either from information because geometry and change arise from relational patterns. At the deepest level, reality may not be made of things. It may be made of differences, distinctions, relations, and from those relations, a fabric appears. From that fabric, gravity bends. From curvature, galaxies form. Inside galaxies, stars ignite. Inside stars, heavy elements fuse. Those elements become planets. On one planet, chemistry becomes life. Life becomes awareness. Awareness asks why space and time cannot exist separately. The question is not outside the universe. It is the universe reflecting on its own structure. You are not observing spacetime from a distance. You are a localized excitation within it, a knot in the informational weave, and your sense of now is the weave examining one of its threads. So return to the opening image. Remove space. Remove time. Nothing remains, not because reality disappears, but because the concepts themselves dissolve. They are not detachable components. They are aspects of a unified order, like two coordinates of a single equation, like melody and rhythm in one song. Space without time is frozen abstraction. Time without space is empty succession. Together they generate existence. But deeper still, both may be emergent from something more fundamental, something not spatial, not temporal, but relational. And that leaves us with one final, quiet realization. If space and time are inseparable, and if you are inseparable from space-time, then you are not merely in the universe. You are a region of its geometry, a segment of its informational structure. Your life is not a fleeting event sliding through a vanishing present. It is a complete curve in the architecture of reality, already written into the fabric that never needed to divide space from time. The river you feel yourself drifting along may not be flowing at all. It may be the shape of the canyon itself, and you are not moving through it. You are the shape, resting, timelessly, inside a universe that was never split into space and time to begin with. And now we step somewhere even quieter, not deeper into physics, deeper into implication. Because once you accept that space and time cannot exist separately, once you see that they merge into space-time, once you suspect that even space-time may emerge from something more fundamental, you are left with a question that is no longer scientific. It is existential. What does this mean for you? Slow down. Feel the weight of that. If reality is not unfolding moment by moment, if the past is not erased and the future, is not unreal. If every event exists as part of a four-dimensional whole, then what is change? What is becoming? What is choice? You feel time as pressure, as movement, as something slipping away. You fear the future because it hasn't happened yet. You regret the past because it feels gone. But in a unified space-time, neither assumption is strictly correct. In relativity, events do not vanish. They are coordinates. Your 10th birthday still exists not as memory alone, but as a location in space-time. Your final breath, whenever it comes, is also a location, both equally real within the geometry. This is sometimes called eternalism, not poetic, geometric. In this view, the universe is a completed structure, like a sculpture. You experience it slice by slice because consciousness traces a path along your world line. But the structure itself does not grow. It does not wait for tomorrow to be built. It already contains it. And that unsettles something primal. Because if the future exists as surely as the past, where does freedom live? Pause. Here. This is not fatalism. It is perspective. Inside space-time, you still deliberate. You still decide. Neurons fire. Muscles contract. Words are spoken. From your internal frame, the future is open because you do not yet know which path your world line will follow. But from the outside geometric view, the path is already part of the manifold. Both descriptions coexist, just as space and time coexist as aspects of one structure. This is the recurring pattern, apparent opposites dissolving into unity. Now consider gravity again. In Newton's world, gravity was a force pulling objects through space over time. In Einstein's view, mass curves space-time itself. Planets follow curved paths, not because they are pulled, but because geometry guides them. The Earth does not feel a hand dragging it around the sun. It moves along the straightest possible line in curved space-time, straight and curved at once, depending on perspective. Your life may be similar. From within, it feels like active motion. From outside, it may be geometry. But let's widen the scale. Because space-time is not static at cosmic size. It expands. Galaxies drift apart. Light stretches. Cosmic background radiation cools. The observable universe grows larger with every passing second. But here is the subtlety. The expansion of space is not something happening in time. It is part of space-time's geometry. The Big Bang is not an explosion that occurred at a location in space. It is a boundary condition of space-time itself. There was no outside into which it expanded. Space expanded everywhere simultaneously, and time began with that expansion. Asking what happened before the Big Bang may be meaningless, not because nothing existed, but because time itself is a feature of the structure that began there. No time, no before. Again, inseparability. Space expanding defines cosmic time. Cosmic time defines expansion. You cannot peel one away, and if you trace that expansion backward, space-time compresses. Density increases. Curvature intensifies. At some limit, classical description fails. Quantum gravity takes over, and the distinction between space and time may blur completely. Some proposals suggest that near the origin, time behaved like another spatial dimension indistinguishable from the others. Only later did one dimension acquire the signature we call temporal. If true, time is not fundamental even in structure. It is a phase, a condition, a symmetry broken as the universe cooled. Just as water can be liquid, ice, or vapor, perhaps space-time can exist in different regimes. And what we call time is a specific state of a deeper entity. Imagine that. Time is a phase transition, an emergent property, not an eternal background. This possibility reshapes our intuition, because it means the distinction between space and time is not absolute even geometrically. It may depend on conditions, which returns us to you. You experience time because you exist in a universe where entropy increases, where causal order is stable, where memory works. But imagine a cosmos in thermal equilibrium. No gradients, no differences, no change. Time would lose operational meaning. Clocks would not tick because ticking requires contrast. Even the concept of duration would dissolve. Time requires asymmetry. Space requires relational distinction. Remove distinction, both vanish. And yet here you are, in a universe rich with difference, where stars burn and die, where black holes evaporate over unimaginable timescales, where quantum fluctuations ripple through vacuum energy, where your heart beats roughly once per second, marking biological time against cosmic background. Your body is a thermodynamic engine, taking low-entropy sunlight transformed by plants, burning it, radiating heat, maintaining order temporarily while increasing disorder globally. Your existence depends on entropy gradients, on time's arrow, but that arrow is not written into the deepest equations. It emerges statistically, which means the feeling of flow, the relentless march forward, is not a fundamental property of spacetime. It is a macroscopic feature of our region of the universe, a regional story, not a universal law. And here lies the final, almost unbearable idea. If spacetime is a unified whole, if the block structure exists fully, if flow is emergent, then the urgency you attach to the present may be misinterpreted. Moments do not vanish into non-existence. They occupy coordinates. They are eternally located within the structure. Nothing is erased. Nothing is overwritten. Your laughter from years ago is still a region in spacetime. Your grief is too, not replaying, not conscious, but present within the geometry. This does not make life trivial. It makes it profound, because every event becomes part of an eternal structure, not fleeting sparks in void, permanent features in the architecture of reality. You are not racing against time. You are tracing a curve that already belongs to spacetime's design. From inside, it feels like movement. From outside, it may be form. And so we return once more to the central truth. Space and time cannot exist separately because they are coordinates of a single entity. They arise together, curve together, emerge together, dissolve together. Every attempt to isolate one destroys the meaning of the other. Motion requires distance. Distance requires geometry. Geometry requires relational structure. Change requires ordered relation. Ordered relation requires something like time. They are intertwined at every level: classical, relativistic, quantum, informational. Not two threads woven together, one thread seen from two directions. And you, the one listening in the quiet, are not outside this fabric. You are a pattern within it, a localized whirl in the space-time continuum, a temporary organization of energy and information, but temporary only from inside the story. Geometrically, your world line is complete, already etched into the manifold, not flowing, not fading, simply existing. So close your eyes one final time. Imagine removing space. Imagine removing time. You cannot, because to imagine is to sequence thought in neural space. To remove both is to remove the conditions of imagination itself. Space and time are not detachable pieces of reality. They are the lens through which reality becomes describable. Perhaps beyond them lies something even deeper: pure relation, pure logic, pure information. But whatever that foundation is, it does not split into here and now. That split belongs to us. And maybe that is the softest revelation of all. The universe was never divided into space and time. We divided it to understand it. Reality itself may be whole, silent, complete, and you are not moving through it. You are part of its shape, resting, always, within a fabric that never needed to come apart. And now, we go beyond even geometry, because if space and time are inseparable, and if space-time itself may be emergent, then the final boundary is not physical, it is perceptual. Everything we have discussed, relativity, quantum gravity, entanglement, entropy, describes structure, but structure is not experience. Space-time may be unified. Information may be fundamental. The block universe may be complete. But none of that explains why there is something it is like to move along a world line, why there is awareness, why there is a sense of now. And this is where the mystery deepens instead of resolves. Because if space-time is a four-dimensional whole, then consciousness cannot be something sliding across it like a flashlight beam. That image is too simple. The flashlight metaphor assumes time is flowing underneath, but in a block universe, nothing flows. So what is awareness doing? Some philosophers suggest consciousness is not moving through time. Instead, it is a pattern extended in time, just as a melody is extended in duration. A melody is not a single note, it is a structured sequence. Remove sequence, and it ceases to exist. You are similar. You are not a frozen instant. You are a temporally extended pattern. Your identity is a structure across spacetime. Memories connecting earlier brain states to later ones. Anticipations linking present states to future ones. You feel flow because your brain encodes change asymmetrically. It remembers one direction. It predicts the other. But from the perspective of physics, the entire pattern exists. Consciousness may not travel. It may simply be the internal perspective of a four-dimensional neural process, a process that spans space-time the way a river spans land. and this reframes death, not as annihilation, but as boundary, the end of a world line. Just as the beginning was a boundary, the structure does not dissolve from space-time. It is part of its geometry. Your life is not erased. It is complete. Finite, yes, but complete. This does not remove sorrow, but it transforms the narrative. Because if space-time is unified, then existence is not a flicker in nothingness. It is a segment in totality, and totality does not forget. Now step back one final time. If space and time cannot exist separately, and if they emerge from deeper informational structure, then the universe is not built from objects. It is built from relations, not from things, but from differences. And you are not an object sitting inside a container. You are a dynamic relational knot, a configuration of energy, matter, and information, inseparable from the geometry that defines you. There is no sharp boundary between you and space-time. Your mass curves it, your movement traces it, your perception slices it. You are not in the universe. You are an expression of it, a localized articulation of space-time structure. When you walk across a room, you are not moving through empty space overflowing time. You are tracing a path within a unified manifold. When you remember your childhood, you are not pulling something from oblivion. You are accessing information about another region of space-time that remains part of the whole. When you anticipate tomorrow, you are modeling another coordinate in the same fabric. Past, present, future. These are not ontological categories. They are perspectival, and perspective depends on motion, gravity, entropy, and cognition. The deeper structure does not privilege now, only you do. But that does not make now meaningless. It makes it intimate. The present is not universal. It is personal. It is the slice of space-time aligned with your world line at this coordinate. And that alignment is precious precisely because it is local. Now consider the universe billions of years from now. Stars will fade. Galaxies will drift beyond each other's horizons. Black holes will evaporate. Entropy will approach maximum. Eventually, structure may thin into uniformity. Time, as defined by change, may lose operational meaning, but all those epochs will still be coordinates in spacetime's architecture. Nothing lost, nothing erased, just different regions of the same whole. If you could see spacetime from outside, if such vision were possible, you would not see moments ticking away. You would see a vast four-dimensional sculpture, filaments of galaxies curving in cosmic web, world lines of stars arcing through gravitational wells, the subtle bend near black holes, the expanding metric stretching like breath, and somewhere inside it a thin, delicate line marking your existence, from first cry to final silence, not fading, not flowing, simply there, part of the structure. Space and time cannot exist separately because they are coordinates of that sculpture. Remove space, and there is no geometry. Remove time, and there is no ordering. Remove both, and the sculpture dissolves into abstraction. They are inseparable because existence itself is structured extension. An extension requires relation. One dimension distinguishes where, the other distinguishes when, but at depth, both distinctions arise from the same relational logic. Perhaps the final insight is this: we evolved to think in separations, here versus there, before versus after, cause versus effect. But reality may not be fundamentally divided. It may be continuous, unified, whole. Our language fractures it, our perception sequences it, our cognition localizes it. But beneath those filters, there may only be structure, one inseparable fabric, and you are not outside examining it. You are one of its folds, which brings us back to the paradox you felt at the beginning. Imagine removing space. Imagine removing time. You cannot, because to imagine requires sequence in neural space. To conceive requires internal duration. To exist requires relation. Space and time are not detachable layers of reality. They are the minimum conditions for structured existence as we know it. But deeper still, they may be shadows cast by something more fundamental, pure relational information. And if that is true, then the universe is not unfolding toward the future. It is not leaving the past behind. It is not racing anywhere. It simply is, complete. You feel motion because you are a pattern extended along one dimension of that completeness. You feel urgency because your biological processes depend on entropy gradients. You feel loss because memory is directional, but the geometry remains silent, whole, unsplit, and perhaps that is the most calming realization of all. The river of time you fear being carried by may not be a river at all. It may be the shape of the landscape, and you are not being swept forward. You are part of the terrain, resting eternally within a universe that never separated space from time in the first place.